In the world of brands, some just seem to last forever. While most, well, they just fade away. What's the secret? It's not luck, it's not their budget, it's not even their product. It's an invisible architecture, a blueprint that connects with us on a really deep level. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that very blueprint. We're talking about the brand story spine.
So let's start with an idea that might feel a little uncomfortable. At this very second, your brand is likely falling apart. Now, why? The reason isn't what you think. It has nothing to do with your product or how much you spend on ads. The reason is you've spent all this time and energy building a beautiful body without a skeleton. You've crafted the skin, the muscle, all the expensive visible parts, but underneath, there's just nothing holding it all together. It's just a pile of pieces waiting to collapse. Let's actually put a name to this problem, because it's a specific diagnosable condition. Let's call it narrative osteoporosis. Just think about that for a moment. Osteoporosis is when bones get weak and brittle. A body can look totally fine on the outside, but underneath, it's structurally unsound, ready to break under the slightest pressure. That is exactly what happens to brands. They make this huge strategic mistake. They build the body, the logos, the ads, the social posts, without a coherent story, without that skeleton. It all comes from this thing called the asset-first illusion, this mistaken belief that if you just create enough cool parts, they'll magically assemble themselves into a meaningful whole. Spoiler alert, they won't.
So how do we fix this? Well, this isn't just an agenda, it's our blueprint for building a brand that actually lasts. First, we'll look at the problem head-on, the collapsing brand body. Then we'll see how structure became a tool for survival. After that, we're going to get into the mechanics of the 8-part narrative engine. We'll explore the psychology, why our brains are wired for this stuff. Then we'll get practical, how to architect your own spine. And finally, we'll wrap up with a really powerful idea. The future is pulled.
Okay, let's dive into the big paradox of modern marketing. We have more tools, more platforms, more ways to create content than ever before. And yet, building a truly memorable brand has never been harder. Why is that? It's because we've all fallen for that asset-first illusion. We think if we just churn out enough videos, enough posts, enough ads, our brand will just appear. But the exact opposite happens. More assets without a solid structure just create more noise. And that is the world of the collapsing brand.
What every brand is really chasing is structural certainty. They want you, the audience, to feel this solid, unwavering confidence in who they are. But for most, the reality is just a pile of expensive noise. I mean, think about it. We live in a world of infinite choice, so our brains have gotten really good at filtering one thing out: incoherence. If your TikToks feel like one brand, your emails another, and your website tells a totally different story, your audience doesn't see a brand. They just see chaos, and our brains are wired to filter out chaos instantly. Without that single, unbreakable story spine, you don't have a relationship with a customer. You just have a series of one-night stands.
So how did we even get here? Well, this whole shift towards structure wasn't just some creative idea someone had in a meeting. It was forged in the fire of the modern market. It went from being a nice little creative tool to an absolute must-have for survival.
This timeline really shows how our thinking had to evolve. Back in the mid-2020s, this thing called contextual fragmentation really took over. Brands had to be on dozens of platforms at once, and the whole thing just became a marketing mess. And that led us right to where we are now. Brand trust is at an all-time low. Why? Not because products are worse, but because brands started to feel fake, and they felt fake because they were all over the place. That inconsistency led to this big realization. In a world of endless noise and AI that can copy any style, narrative weight, that solid feeling of a logical story, is the one thing you just can't fake. It's that human logic. And that's what's driving the future. A huge shift away from just managing assets to something called structural governance.
And now we get to the very heart of this explainer, the mechanism itself. We're about to look under the hood of the engine. But I want you to forget about those friendly little brand guideline documents. This is not that. This is a rigid, powerful, 8-part narrative engine. This is the skeleton.
Before we dissect all 8 beats, let's just zoom out and look at the 4 major phases they create. It's a journey, right? We start in the old world, just setting the scene. Then comes the break, this big moment that changes everything. That launches us into the logical journey, a chain of cause and effect that leads us, finally, to the new world, a new, better reality. This 4-act structure is what gives the whole story its momentum.
Okay, let's break this engine down beat by beat.
Beat number 1, the status quo. Once upon a time, this was the world. This is so important. Before you can introduce any change, you have to define what's normal. What was the accepted truth? You have to paint that picture clearly. For instance, think about the world before the iPhone. The status quo was physical keyboards, having a separate MP3 player and a phone, clunky web browsers. That was just normal. You have to define that old world before you can completely shatter it.
And then comes the break. Beat 2 is the inciting incident. But one day, everything changed. This is the exact moment the status quo just isn't good enough anymore. It could be a shift in the market, a huge new pain point, whatever it is, it's the catalyst for the entire story. Without that clear one day, you don't have a story, you just have a description. For Apple, the inciting incident was Steve Jobs walking on that stage and saying, "Today Apple is going to reinvent the phone." That was the moment the old world died. That's the break.
Okay, now we're in the heart of the engine. This is the chain of progression, and it covers beats 3 through 6. And honestly, this is where most brand stories just completely fall apart. They just list features. A real story spine builds a chain of logic. So beat 3 is the first domino because of that inciting incident. So because the old phone was broken. This happened. People realized they were carrying way too many devices. That's link 1. Beat 4 builds on that. And because of that, because they had too many devices, it was just inconvenient. This desire for one single elegant thing started to grow. See the chain? One thing leads logically to the next. Beats 5 and 6 just keep raising the stakes, showing how the old tools just weren't cutting it anymore. This logical chain is what builds that tension, and it proves that a new solution isn't just nice to have, it's absolutely necessary.
So this logical chain builds and builds until it reaches beat 7, the climax. Until finally, the solution was reached. Now this is not just a product reveal. This is the moment your product is shown in action, fixing the big problem you just spent all this time setting up. It's the moment of truth, the big payoff. For the iPhone, this was the moment they showed it browsing the real internet, playing music, making calls, all in one. It wasn't a feature list, it was the direct solution to the entire chain of problems we just established. And finally, we landed beat 8, the new equilibrium. And ever since then, the world has been better. This isn't just a simple happily ever after. This last beat has to show the lasting positive change. You're showing the new, improved world that your solution created. You're closing the loop. And ever since the iPhone, our relationship with technology, with information, with each other, it's been fundamentally different. That's the new permanent reality.
Now here's where the elite brands take this to a whole other level. They don't just write this story, they measure it. They use a concept called narrative velocity. I mean, think about that. They are literally measuring the speed at which a customer moves from beat 1 to beat 8. How? By tracking how you engage with their content. Did you watch the status quo video, then click an article about the inciting incident, and then download a paper about the chain of progression? The speed and completion rate of that journey gives the brand a coherence score. They aren't just counting views, they're tracking structural adoption. Is our story actually sinking in? This is how you turn storytelling from an art into a measurable science.
So, we've seen the what and the how, but now let's talk about the why. Why is this 8-part structure so powerful? Well, the answer isn't in some marketing textbook, it's deep inside our own psychology and neuroscience. It's all about how our brains are wired.
The first principle is the narrative bias. For millions of years, our survival depended on spotting cause and effect. Because that berry made someone sick, I shouldn't eat it. Because I heard that sound, there's danger nearby. Our brains are not built to process random facts. They're built to look for stories. So when a brand gives us a clear, logical story spine, it's not just marketing, it's speaking the brain's native language. It's basically performing what the source calls a logic bypass, making the message feel less like a sales pitch and more like, well, like the truth.
And the second driver is this really cool psychological thing called the Zeigarnik effect. Basically, our brains hate an open loop. They need closure. When you start a story with once upon a time, and then you introduce a problem with but one day, you create this tension. You've opened a loop in the listener's mind, and they have this subconscious need to see it closed. They have to get to the and ever since then. That's what pulls them through the narrative beat by beat.
So when you boil it all down, it comes to this. Our brains don't just see brands, they encode them into our memory. A brand that's all over the place gets encoded as noise, and that just leads to confusion. But a brand with a strong, coherent story spine, that gets encoded as truth. And that encoding leads to something way more powerful than a click. It leads to conviction. Every metric a business tracks is really just a record of a human brain deciding to move from confusion to conviction, because it finally found something solid to believe in.
Okay, so let's shift from theory into practice. This isn't just some interesting idea to think about. It's a framework you can actually use. This part is all about how you can become the architect of your own brand's story.
The process here is really disciplined. Step 1 is to do a skeletal audit. That means you grab your last 20 marketing pieces, emails, posts, ads, and you ignore the logos and colors. Just read the words. Is there a single, logical story, or is it just a random collection of messages? You have to be brutally honest. Step 2, you architect the 8 beats. This isn't a quick email chain, it's a serious workshop. You get your team in a room and you write one single sentence for each of the 8 beats. That becomes your constitution. And finally, you govern with it. Sequential governance means that every single creative brief from now on has to state which of the 8 beats it's serving. If a new ad doesn't clearly move the story forward, it just doesn't get made. Simple as that. This is how you build something that feels inevitable.
And that brings us to our conclusion. The brand story spine is really where the cold, hard logic of structure meets the undeniable reality of human belief. It's more than just a marketing tactic. It's a philosophy for building things that actually last in this chaotic world.
In the end, the truth is simple. We crave coherence. We want to believe in something that makes sense, something that won't fall apart. And this brings us to a huge shift in how we should think about growth. The best marketing doesn't push people through a funnel, it pulls them toward value. By building this unbreakable spine, you stop shouting messages at the world. Instead, you build a bridge of structure over a canyon of chaos. You create this powerful, gravitational pull that draws the right people, not just to a product, but toward a truth they can finally believe in. You become the signal in the noise.